All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our training this evening. Thank you all for being here. This evening we have Dr. Abby Herringshaw, clinical psychologist with Project AFECT of Stanford Medicine Children's Health. Next slide, please. First, for anyone who's new here, we want to briefly talk about what the FRC does here in San Mateo County. The FRC serves families who have children with disabilities between the ages 0 to 22. We are staffed by parents and caregivers of children and young adults with disabilities, and we provide support, information, resources, and referrals to navigate the systems out there. We also offer trainings, support groups, a resource binder, and a monthly newsletter. I want to give a disclaimer that the Family Resource Center is not a legal firm or legal services agency, and we cannot provide any legal advice. Any information provided by the Family Resource Center should not be considered a means of taking the place of legal advice that must be obtained through an attorney. We invite you all to connect with us, and I'll put our contact information in the chat. I also want to introduce my team who is here with us tonight. My name is Iris Wen. I'm the FRC training coordinator, and here with me is Patricia Drugo, FRC supervisor, and Sonia.
We might be having some connection issues, but we are trying to introduce our team. Thank you for your patience. Let me see if Iris will regain connectivity. Just a second. I'll just go ahead and continue. We are going to be recording this presentation, and we would like to let you know that we would like for you all to have a mute if you're not speaking. Select English or Spanish in the language channel. There's an icon interpretation that can allow you to select the language that you want to listen to this presentation. We are going to have a breakout room towards the end of the presentation for QA questions. And we invite you to enter your questions in the chat, or also when the presentation is always towards the end, you can raise your hand and you can also unmute yourself to ask your questions. We're going to be sending a survey at the end of this presentation, so we would like your feedback so we can prepare better trainings for you all. Thank you so much. We're going to also send an email, a follow-up email to all participants. And that will be tomorrow with all the materials that are going to be presented today and the survey also as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I think, Abby, you can go next.
So hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Dr. Abby Herringshaw. I'm a clinical psychologist at Stanford in the Department of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics. I am here with a couple members of my team from Project AFECT that is helping support this parent training. And Project AFECT is a project at Stanford that's being funded by the California Department of Developmental Services to help increase access to services for families in California. So with that said, I'm going to be presenting tonight on creating visual aids to support positive behaviors for kiddos with autism and/or other developmental disabilities. So first, I just want to start with what are visual supports in general. So this is a wide class of things that can be called the visual support. I'm going to be showing you guys a lot of examples today, but there's no one correct way to do visual support. So really, any visual cue that's used to aid communication is a visual support. So that can be pictures, videos, even gestures or showing objects. Anytime we use some kind of visual cue to aid our verbal communication or written communication. And this can help children better understand what others are trying to communicate to them. So as a communication aid and expressively and receptively actually on their behalf there, and then expressively us understand what they're trying to communicate to us. Outside of being a communication aid, visual supports can also serve as a behavior management aid, even for kiddos that don't have significant communication difficulties just by providing a consistent reminder of rules or expectations. Okay, and why are visual supports so helpful? Particularly for kiddos with autism or developmental delays, verbal communication is often a weakness for those kiddos. So this helps aid communication. And for a lot of kiddos, visual information is something that they can process more quickly and more easily than verbal communication. This also helps set expectations, again, for kids on the spectrum in particular. Not knowing what's happening next, things being non-routine or unexpected is a really triggering or troublesome situation that can cause a lot of behavioral issues. And it also just provides a consistent visual reminder of rules and expectations. And I know the intro we've talked a lot about this being a communication aid, but even for us, all of us, we all benefit oftentimes from visual cues. So why am I showing you a PowerPoint presentation instead of just talking at you for 2 hours? You're probably going to understand the information I'm giving you much more easily because I have some visual supports. I think always of like the pool rules too, right? You don't just walk into the pool and someone like lists off all the rules for you and expects you to remember them for the rest of the time. There's signs everywhere. So that consistent reminder of what's expected, what are the rules here visually represented, that helps us all remember, again, sets those clear expectations for us of what am I supposed to be doing right now? What's expected of me right now? So this is something we all benefit from. And there's a lot of research actually on visual supports, particularly for kiddos with autism. They are considered an evidence-based practice for individuals with autism, which is a fairly high bar. I don't remember offhand the exact number. I want to say 20 something considered evidence-based practices currently, different types of interventions for kids with autism. And so to be considered an evidence-based practice, that means multiple high-quality studies have shown that they're helpful for individuals with autism. And specifically in a recent review, we've seen that visual supports have been shown to increase understanding, communication, independence, participation of kiddos on the spectrum in a wide variety of activities, and inclusion with typically developing peers. On the other hand, they've been shown to decrease anxiety and challenging behavior. So a lot of research supports these being helpful strategies for kiddos on the spectrum in particular. So with that said, what are types of visual supports am I going to be covering today? Specifically today, we're going to be covering choice boards, first then boards, several different types of visual schedules, ways to visually set limits, available and not available cards, weight cards, and timers and transitions. So one thing I want to say, and just kind of to set some context before we jump into these ones, again, there's a million different ways to do visual supports. There's no right or wrong way. So these are just some examples and some ideas of some common ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you lots of examples, like I said, and I also have provided in the handouts, hopefully you guys got the starter kit with all these templates. Again, those are examples and starting points. We always want to individualize these things. So these are meant to be things to give you ideas. Hopefully a lot of the templates will work for your kiddo without a lot of individualization. But a lot of times it does take tweaking and thinking what's going to be best for my kiddo specifically. So if you see something that you're like, I think that would work better a little bit this way for my kid, do it that way. This is not to say this is the correct way to do things. The other thing I want to say about visual supports is they're meant to help with things that are sometimes difficult. And so if we are covering thing and your child, like we're going to do choice boards first. If your child can make choices fine without the help of a choice board, by no means am I saying you should add this or you have to add this, right? It's all kind of like cost benefit of what is the time and effort, because there's a little bit of time and effort to create these and teach how to use them. Is that worth it for you? So if you don't need that level of support, then maybe that's not the right fit for your kiddo. Again, every kiddo is different. So there's going to be a lot of individualization throughout this. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first type of support I have here is a choice board. So what this is a visual representation of available choices that a child can pick from. And you can see some examples on the right there. So different activity choices or choices for a snack. When is that helpful? This is the one of all the ones that we're going to look at that is really could replace verbal communication as a means of expressive communication. So for a way of, if your child doesn't use words much at all, this could be something that could kind of replace words in this one context. And it's similar to the idea of PECS, the Picture Exchange Communication System, if anyone's ever heard of that. PECS is a very specific copyrighted branded thing that's pretty involved. So it's not the exact same thing, but it's the same basic idea here. And so if your child has difficulty expressing their needs due to minimal verbal skills, this can be helpful. When a child tends to become fixated on unavailable objects, and if a child makes inappropriate food or activity choices when left to their own devices. So that last one's more of a behavior management aid, and we'll talk about in what circumstances or how to use this too, even if your child does have plenty of verbal skills, if they still have a little bit of behavioral difficulty making choices. So what this really is, I have some examples here, although I did not put my sticker on it. One second. So I have an example here, if you guys can see, it's just a board of different options you can choose, just like we see with the snack board. And then you would just present it to the kiddo and they would just pick, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my background off really quickly, if you will give me just 1 second so that you guys can see this better. And I do apologize that there's not the most scenic background behind me, it's a very blank wall. Okay, so this is just a board here with different options on it, and then you would just want to present this to the kiddo and they could just pick the one they wanted. So here we have some different play activities, Legos, computer, iPad, and book, and then they would just pick the one they wanted and either hand it to you or you can place it into this I choose selection there. So that's a basic idea, is that they would, instead of using words if that's difficult, or if this helps them in addition to words, to just pick by looking at the pictures what object they would like. Okay, so how do we create a choice board? So what do we need? We need a blank template. That one that we just looked at was in the starter kit that I sent you guys. Icon images with different choices. So I had some toys on that one we just looked at. Down here, I have more like snacks and foods as choices. A printer and scissors. I'm going to talk about first the way to make the most involved one, kind of like I just showed you guys with a laminator and some Velcro. But we'll also talk about in a minute, if you're not ready to invest in a laminator and all that, what are some other ways you can make this happen? So if you're going to do the most involved classic way, this is what we would do. So you would want to print and laminate your blank board template first. You need to print and cut out your icon choices. You have to cut them out before you laminate them. You can't put the full thing through the laminator. Place soft Velcro on the laminated board, or vice versa. You just want to make sure you're doing that consistently. So all of the boards have the soft Velcro maybe, and all the icons have the hard Velcro. So that way you can switch them all back and forth and they all go together. It's also sometimes good to avoid doing a straight line with your choice board, because you don't want it to be confused with the schedule. Like first, we're going to do this one, this one, this one. We'll talk about schedules in just a couple of minutes. And then you want to place your hard Velcro or the other sides on the icon choices. So one thing I want to say before I go, we're going to talk about some like of the hack versions in just a minute. I'm all about like piloting something as cheaply and easily as possible before you invest in something. So I think if you aren't sure if this is going to work for your kiddo, which you never know, all kiddos are so different. I've been so sure something's going to work with a kiddo before and just found that it wasn't right for them. So I always think try it first. So those are where the kind of the hacks come in that we'll talk about in a second. if you do decide you want to invest in a laminator, they're less money than I thought they would. I was surprised would be when I first purchased one. I thought they would be like hundreds of dollars, like a printer. I think currently I recently had to replace mine that I originally bought for $20 after like 10 years, just a couple months ago. So that lasted me a while. I think now with inflation, it cost me $30. So more affordable than I thought it would be. You do have to buy the laminator pages to go along with it. If you go through a lot, those can be a little bit pricey, but again, not too bad. As far as with Velcro, I like to use the little Velcro, the circles. I find that those go further than the long strips, although I have long strips on the back here. Those can be really convenient because you can just stick lots of icons and like fit as many as you can. But oftentimes the little circles, I find one package gets me a lot further than one long strip does. Okay, that said, if you are not ready to invest in all the Velcro and the laminator sheets yet, what can we do? So one way to do this that makes it still reusable and interchangeable is actually what I just showed you. This is actually not laminated because I was a little short for time today. This is a printed sheet that's placed in one of these like plastic page protectors that you would usually put in a 3-ring binder. And then some of my icons are laminated, but I was also short on time today and didn't feel like getting my laminator out. So several of these are actually just printed out. And then this is packaging tape that I've just put on both sides of it. And you can still put the Velcro on it there, which was actually an idea I got from Melissa, another person on the Project AFECT team. So shout out to Melissa for a great idea there. So you can do the packaging tape and the Velcro, and it's still completely interchangeable. It's actually nothing on this particular sheet is actually laminated at all, and still works quite well. Other things you can do if you're not worried about it being interchangeable, then you can just print off all the, put all the icons onto the sheet on your computer and print it off with them all the way on there. That works well if the choices are consistently the same, like this activity choice one here. This is something I use sometimes for kiddos that when left to their own devices tend to get into a little bit of trouble. Like I've had kiddos before that when they get bored, start taking things apart that should not be taken apart, those kinds of things. And this is just a list of things that are consistently good choices. It's kind of like a visual menu. And that's more of a behavioral management aid. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. But something like that is something that works well to print off and just keep it as is, because you don't need to be changing it consistently. But you could also do this with more of a choice board to make choices and just have your child point to what they wanted. Okay. One thing that I want to make clear with all of these, every now and then a kiddo sees something and it just like intuitively they get it, the visual, and it takes very little teaching. Most of the time it takes a little bit of teaching. Again, this is meant to make your life easier and support a skill that they're having a hard time learning. So if the teaching the visual is more work than teaching them the actual skill of choosing or using words without this, it's maybe not going to be a good fit. But for a lot of kids, this is a skill they can learn easier than using their words or you know, whatever is the relevant situation with some of the other ones besides choice boards. But it still takes a little bit of teaching. So with something like a choice board, I would probably present it with just a few options to start, or maybe only even one option. It might be helpful to start with one clear preferred option along with a few less preferred options. So the example I have here, I have cookies, broccoli, and eggs. And I think most kiddos you give those 3 choices to are going to choose cookies. And that's okay to start with if you kind of know what they're going to want as far as just teaching them how does this thing work. So you want to have that preferred item ready to give them right away, as well as the other things in case they do accidentally choose one of those. And then you're going to want to use as much off.
Abby, you're cutting off a little bit. You lost that.
Use as much guidance as needed to get them to select the item. So it might be hand over hand to start with, to guide them to get the item that you think they want. And this is why you would want to have something that you think pretty clearly, I know what they're going to choose right here, so that you can guide them to the right thing. And then you would kind of guide them to either put it into the I choose square or just to hand it to you. Either one of those is fine. I would just pick one and do that thing consistently though, so that they know their routine. If you're also trying to build speech, you probably would want to verbally label it along with your choosing as you did so. So you might guide them to choose the thing and say cookies as you did so. And then immediately hand to them the item of choice. And this is really the critical part of teaching, is we need to show them the significance of this, right? They might not inherently get it. A lot of times they don't. But through cause and effect, that's the best way that kids learn, is through success and cause and effect, right? So it's going to be that process of, oh, when I hand you this square that has this picture of cookies, I get cookies, right? And a couple times of doing that is really the teaching process here. And some kids, you know, as with any other skill, take a little bit longer to learn things than others. A couple teaching tips here. Try to ensure the child's looking at the board first. So a lot of times, if you're first introducing this, it means nothing to your kiddo. They're just going to be like, well, I see cookies over there, right? They're not going to be looking at this. So try your best to get it in their field of vision first and to make sure they see the cookies on there. So try to get their attention. You might want to mix up the location of items each time. So I also have seen kids get pretty lazy with this. And they're like, I know I grabbed something off of this and hand it to you to get cookies, but they don't really get the pictures yet. So they just pick the first one or just kind of lazily pick one each time. So to avoid them just always picking the first one, you might want to mix them up and kind of help them learn, okay, here's what it really is. It has to be the one that says cookie. And if they pick a different item, give them that thing to show them it does matter which one I pick. If I pick broccoli, I'm going to be handed broccoli, right? And so that's why we do want to have all of the things ready. That's really going to help them learn the connection between the pictures and the real world items. Again, just through that repeated practice there. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I forgot to change this one. Okay. And then just general usage. After we've taught these, we're going to want to place them in a logical, accessible location. So if it's an activity choice board near most of the toys and things, snacks should be in the kitchen. If this is not readily accessible to your child, and especially a choice board is something where, okay, I don't have words to ask you what I want. A lot of times kids, we see negative behavior or like aggression there, or trying to climb up on the counters themselves or some other means of trying to access these things. If this is not readily available, they're not going to do this. They're going to do that other behavior to try to access that thing again, right? So this needs to be somewhere that they can get to it. So within view and or reach, if they select appropriate options without referencing the board, allow it. So if your child does have some speech, and they come up to you and they're like, I want to play Legos and that's loud, don't get out the board and make them do it necessarily, unless you're trying to teach them right at first. That's the goal we're working towards, so let them do it. But if your child kind of requests unavailable choices often, like is always wanting to say, play iPad, and that's not an option, or just kind of says, I'm hungry, I'm bored, without making a good choice, that's when I would go ahead and pull this out and direct them if your child does have the speech anyways. And again, that's where the activity board, let me double check to have a whole slide here. No, this is when the activity choice board for a child that has speech is most helpful as a behavior aid. Again, if they make poor choices when left to their own, this is kind of like a visual menu, right? So I think a lot of times I just hear kiddos be like, I'm bored. And then parents' response is like, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. This is just kind of doing part of that process for them. Instead of them being dependent on you to go make that list for them, if you can have that readily available, that's going to support their ability to independently make a good choice and to kind of pick activities even on their own that they're allowed to be doing, that you're happy that they're doing, and they're not tearing apart the house and stuff. Okay. So that is choice boards. The next thing we're going to cover is a first then board. So what is this? It's a visual representation of two activities in the order that they're going to occur. And most frequently, it's going to be something your child doesn't like, followed by something that they do like. So first, an activity that's typically difficult or that your child typically avoids, then an activity that's highly preferred and motivating for your child. That's the way you would usually do this. When is this helpful? To get kiddos to follow directions, just two-step directions here. Learning new skills if we need to do something first, but then you can do this other thing, completing less preferred activities, and clarifying when they can do more preferred activities. So how do we create a first then board? I have my examples here. Just a second. I had my example here. Okay. So again, one way you might set this up, I have first get dressed, then Lego on here, I think would be one common way. So if getting dressed is usually a difficult thing for your kiddo, you might want to put that one first, then we'll do Lego. So first I'll go through how to make kind of the full gambit with the laminator and Velcro. And then again, we can talk about other ways to pilot this more cheaply. So you will need the blank first then template. You'll need icon images with activities or items, and again, both preferred and non-preferred to fill both your first and your then. A printer and scissors, and ideally you would want a laminator and laminating sheets and Velcro. So similar to with steps with the choice board, and a lot of these are going to start to look the same here. You print and laminate your board template. You print and cut out your icon shapes. After you've cut out your icons, you laminate them, place soft Velcro on the board and hard Velcro on the icons, or, again, or vice versa. Just make sure you're consistently doing the same thing. Again, you can use a plastic page protector in a very similar way to what we talked about before, and packaging tape on the icons plus Velcro to make a pretty good version of this that you can reuse. If you don't want to change it, you can, but you do want to reuse it so that there's a consistent thing you need to do. First clean up, then iPad or something. If there's a consistent two-step routine, you can just print it out that way and then put it into your plastic page protector. And then you can just cross off each one with a dry erase marker. If you only want to use it once, you can just print it off and cross them off with a marker or a pencil. So again, if you just want to pilot it once and see, does this seem to be helpful? That's something you might want to do. Okay. To actually use your first then board, first select and place your first icon. So what is the activity that you need the child to complete? Again, a lot of times it's going to be something that's difficult for them. And then the then icon. So something that will serve as a reward. And if your child is verbal and is able to, you can absolutely let them choose that one themselves, what they want to work for that day. So you want to get the child's attention and then clearly state first, get dressed is what I have on here on the example, and their first lunch, whatever you have in there, then Legos, or first lunch, then play, pointing to the board as you do so. And then right away, you're going to want to direct your child to begin the first activity. You want to praise them as they work on completing the first activity, not just at the end, especially oftentimes this is something difficult for them. Kind of cheerlead them through it a little bit. And redirect is needed if they try to leave or go do something else. That, okay, if you want to do this then thing, first get dressed, then Legos. Once the first activity is completed, you'll want to definitely praise them a lot. And then this isn't always necessary, but sometimes if you want to remove this to indicate it's done or just cross it off, otherwise you can just say, okay, all done, get dressed. Now, Legos, and then immediately give them that other thing. Do not allow access to the then before they have finished this first thing. So it's a very kind of simple, intuitive concept. Again, oftentimes needs a little bit of teaching, but it's up to you to kind of show them when this one is done, look, now this one. All right. Okay, so that is all on first then board. And again, I feel like I want to ask for any questions with any of these, but we'll have plenty of time for questions on all of these at the end. Okay, so we will move on to visual schedules. And again, we're going to cover a couple different kinds of visual schedules because there are different ways to do this. So what is this? It's a visual representation of something that's going to happen either throughout the whole day or within a task or activity. It's kind of an extension of a first then board where the first then just has 2 activities. This is several activities that will happen throughout the day in the order that they will occur. So the first way I want to talk about using visual schedules is to use them to learn new skills or multi-step activities or routines. So in this case, this is going to be a visual representation of the steps to complete a multi-step activity. So this is helpful when you need to break down and teach a task that has multiple steps. It's helpful for helping a kiddo move through a non-preferred activity with multiple steps, just in that it helps them see how far along we are. I always think to that end, like if your computer randomly does an update, and it's always at the worst time, right? And you're waiting for it to just be done. If you can at least see that progress bar of like, how close am I? That really helps you be like, oh, okay, I'm almost done, right? It helps kind of stay calm. It helps manage frustration. Same idea, even if maybe the kiddo knows the steps, but they fight you on it. I'll just kind of seeing, okay, I'm halfway done. Now I only have 1 step left. That might help with behavior management in that same kind of way, just being able to visually see the progress. It also helps reduce distraction or missteps. So I hear from a lot of families about kiddos that start cleaning their room or getting dressed, and then 5 minutes later, parents go check on them to see if they finished getting dressed and they're playing dolls. So something like this is something that would help them kind of progress through an activity or a routine. Again, just providing that constant visual reminder can help refocus them. So I have lots of examples here. There was toothbrushing, I think is a really common one parents ask for on the first page. On this page, I have both steps to use the potty, which is another common one parents ask me for, and washing our hands. Those are all in the starter kit as well. But you can make these and adapt these for all kinds of activities. So some examples here, making the bed or washing laundry. So kind of like home chores, things like that. Even a face washing schedule. So what are really the steps to wash my face here? Other things you can use these for. So self-care routines, we've seen several of: shower, dressing, tying shoes. What are all the steps to this? Chores and daily living skills. Again, we saw a couple examples there on the slide before. Laundry, doing the dishes, cooking could all be broken down step by step like this. But even academic steps, sometimes we could do academic tasks. So I don't have an example of one of these, but what are the steps to solve a word problem, right? That's something you could break down of like, okay, is it a plus or a minus? What is the starting value? Like those are actually maybe all the steps. Or if you needed to write a paper, do you first pick a topic and then second make an outline, or whatever are these individual steps? That's something that could kind of support executive functioning in those situations. Okay. So the steps to create a visual schedule. First, you're going to want to choose your activity. Again, if they're able to do these things just fine, we don't need to add this. This is if you have an activity or routine that your kiddo usually has difficulty completing independently. The next step is to identify the steps. So observe someone might be helpful, or do it yourself, completing that task, and really stop and think, what is every individual step I do to complete this? And the level and detail of the number of steps might vary based on the individual. So if we were to go back a couple of slides here, let's see, to this potty training one, for example, where it says pants down. Some kiddos might be fine with pants down. Some kiddos might be like unbutton, then undo zipper, then pull my pants down. So that's what I mean by the level of detail. Some kids are okay with a little bit more of a jump. Some kiddos, you really need to get into the nitty gritty of every single step here so that you don't lose them. And that's just, again, knowing your child, a little bit of trial and error. Okay. Once you've identified the steps, you're going to want to create your visual. So find or create pictures to represent each step, and then place them in the order and print your visual. And this is one where you can usually print the thing out completed beforehand. You don't usually need to be switching things up if theirs are consistently done in the same order. And then you're going to want to laminate or place your schedule or protect it, place it in a plastic page protector. So I have, for example, the toothbrushing one right here. Since you don't need to change these ones, they often do quite well in a plastic page protector. But if these are things you do every day, which a lot of these kinds of routines are, you tend to reuse these. So usually doing some kind of protection, either through laminating or one of these page protectors, is kind of worth its while in a situation like this. And then how to use this. Hang or place your visual in a location where the activity usually occurs. So toothbrushing might go in the bathroom, right? Hang this up, post it on the wall somewhere. Again, just think of a logical place to put it. And then help the individual follow along with the steps as they complete the task. So again, there's going to be a teaching element here. Initially, we might provide a lot of support to follow along, and then we're going to work to fade out that support over time. So the ultimate goal with something like this is just independent completion, where the kiddo is able to refer to the visual themselves in most cases. So I have a couple different examples on here of how you might work to fade out a prompt. So in this first case, I think the highest level of support for either would be that you kind of prompt every step along the way, and then you also, I meant to get my dry erase markers out before looking a second. Would probably want to use a dry erase marker to kind of check off and show where we're at. So, okay, we've got our toothbrush out and we're done with that one. Now we're on this one. What's next? Get toothpaste, and then prompt the kiddo to go ahead and do that. Once they've got the toothpaste, okay, we're done with this one. What's next? Toothpaste on, right? And so you would go through each step of it like that initially. So that's kind of the highest level of support. Which way you go next, it kind of depends on what you're teaching. So the first thing first kind of sequence I'm going to go through here is if you want to fade out the dry erase marker immediately, that usually makes the most sense in a case of something where the kiddo's not going to be able to get up and dry erase themselves. So like washing your hands is a good example. If you have wet hands with soap on them, you can't stop usually and pick up the dry erase marker and cross it off. So in this case, that's probably the first thing we want to lose here. So to do that, you might want to go from crossing it off yourself to then just pointing and prompting without the cross off. So fade that out first so that you would point to each step as they complete it. And so the first step is water on, and then prompt them to turn the water on. Once they do that without crossing it off, you would just go, okay, the next step's wetting your hands, prompt them to do that. And then when they're done with that one, okay, what's next? Soap on, prompt them to put soap on, and so forth. The next step might be just kind of pointing to each step along the way without additional prompting. From there, you might want to just prompt them to point to the steps on their own, or just kind of reference if you're able to tell they're clearly doing that, the different steps. And then the final step here might be independent completion by themselves. So that's something over time you would want to fade out. Again, not like one time we do one and then the next one. You want to see the kiddo gets it with that level of support, then you can move to the next one. Okay. A second example of fading here might be in the case of a situation where continuing to cross off makes a lot of sense. So like the laundry one we looked at, I don't have that one printed off, but something like that, or something more complex like this solving a math problem, might make sense to continue to cross it off. And in that case, we really want to just teach the kiddo to do that themselves. So you first start with the highest level of support, you point to each step, say it out loud, and then prompt them to do it. then you can cross it off for them and prompt them to go to the next one. But the next step here, instead of totally losing your marker or whatever you're crossing off with, you want to teach them to do that themselves. So point to each step as you prompt them to complete it. Once it's completed, prompt them to cross it off themselves, and then proceed in the same manner until the task is completed. And from there, you would kind of fade out similarly. So prompt them to point to and cross off each step, and then prompt only as needed. And from there, you would go to independent completion. Okay. All right. So the next way we can use visual schedules is for a daily schedule. So this, in this case, this is a visual representation of what's going to happen throughout the day in order. A lot of times kiddos use visual schedules either at school or like in their OT sessions, and this is probably more similar to what they're doing in that situation. So it's just all the things that are going to happen either this morning or over the next couple hours or this whole day, but just setting that clear expectation so kiddos know what's coming. And this is helpful for decreasing anxiety or rigidity around transitions or what's going to happen next when kiddos don't do well with uncertainty, which we see often with our kiddos on the spectrum, so that they know what to expect. Also helps move through non-preferred activities because there's probably a lot of times a mix of things they like and things they don't like on here. And again, it just kind of shows, okay, I'm doing this now, but there's other good things coming. And also helps clarify when preferred activities will occur. Okay. So how do we create a visual schedule? Again, we'll need our blank schedule template, which is in the starter kit. I'm just going to get mine set up real quick here. So kind of a blank template here. You'll need your icon images for all of the individual pieces, a printer and scissors, and ideally the laminator and laminating sheets and Velcro. So to make the full shebang here, what you'll want to do is print out and laminate just your board first, then separately print and cut out your icon choices. Once they're already cut out, you can laminate them individually. Again, place the soft Velcro always on the board. Sometimes it's nice in the templates that I sent you that are in the starter kit, there's a couple that have like boxes already, that there's like one with 6 and I think one with 12, but there's also just a blank one that says my schedule at the top like this. Sometimes I think that's the most useful because then I just have 3 different strips of Velcro here and you can totally adjust how many different activities you put throughout the day. So maybe, let's see, there's 6 that I have fit on here. Maybe you just need 3. Maybe you have a whole full day and you need all 3 strips, right? And so you can really adjust pretty flexibly the amount that way by just placing a couple long strips down. So that's honestly my preferred way to do it. So you place those on the laminated board and then place the hard Velcro on the icon choices. I also like on the back, there's one page you'll see in the starter kit that just says done. It's meant to go on the back of one of the other ones so that as things are done, you can just kind of take them off, say it's not there anymore. We put it on the back and it's just a nice, easy way to store some of your extra pieces that help you kind of put them somewhere where you won't lose them because it's easy to lose all the little icons. Okay. Again, there's plenty of ways to kind of hack this. So the plastic page protector on the board and the packaging tape on the icons and Velcro can pretty much do exactly the same as a laminator can. If you want to reuse it, but it's not, you don't have to change it. You can just print it out already completed and put it in your page protector and then use a dry erase marker as you're done with each one. If you didn't have all of that, you could also just print paper off and place Post-it notes over the ones that are completed thus far. If you only need to use it once, you can just print it off and cross it off with a marker as you go along. Okay. And again, there's no one way to do any of these things. So this is a common way I like to make them. There's some different examples here. Sometimes people make a to do and done, and then you would just kind of move it from one column to the next as you complete them. So that's definitely, if you think that'll work better for your child or they would understand that better, that's the way you can do this. It's what's on the left here. The one in the middle is more kind of written. So again, if your child is more verbal, they might still benefit from knowing what's coming next and what we're going to do throughout the day. So you can use more words if your child understands that format. And then the one on the end, again, has more of like a checklist style as you go along. So there's plenty of ways to do this, no one correct way. To use your visual schedule, again, you're going to want to select the icons for the day and put them in the order that you're going to do them. I lost one somewhere, but that's okay. Put them in the order that you're going to do them. And again, the level and detail of the number of steps will depend on your child. So on this one, I just have get dressed to kind of represent that's what we're doing this morning. Some kiddos might need you to put like shirt on, pants on, brush teeth, every single step that's going to happen there. Just depends on the kiddo. So do a little trial and error and see what they're able to kind of generalize there. And then place the icons in the order that they're going to occur onto your schedule. All right. Again, a little teaching often involved, so you might want to start by prompting your child to check their schedule or some kind of standard phrase that you say the same way every time. Prompt them to either point to or look at the first one, try to direct them to it, identify what it is. So first, get dressed. Then you're going to prompt them to begin that activity. When they're finished getting dressed, direct them back to here and say, okay, get dressed is all done. Oh, it's on the back. That's where my missing icon is. Next is watch TV. And now we can direct them to go begin watch TV. And again, you would move through the whole schedule like that until you're done. Over time, the same way we kind of faded out support with this, the schedules before, we'll want to get them more independently at following the schedule themselves. But initially, we might want to help them quite a bit going through it. So after each one, again, prompt them to check the schedule, going to the next activity, and then repeat until you've completed all listed activities. One last thing I want to cover, and then we're just going to take a short break for a few minutes before we do the second half here. It's an object schedule. So an object schedule is a little bit more concrete. It's a little bit more if your child is really having trouble with the visual schedule. This is kind of the highest level of support to do this. So it's actually getting objects, which in some cases are easier for a child to understand, especially a child that is really minimally verbal. Oftentimes this works better because it is so concrete. And you would just place them in the order that you're going to do them, but you would use it the same as the visual schedule. So you would just direct them to the first thing. So on the top, you see like a little book as a representation of library, a small bus as a representation of bus. They have a little toy toilet as bathroom and crayons as art. On the bottom, there's some blocks. It's probably playtime. There's some kind of book. I don't honestly know what that third one is, but you would have to pick things that make sense to your child. I think like a spoon for breakfast, right? Makes sense. A toothbrush for toothbrush. And a lot of times I think it's nice if you're going to do something like an object schedule to have a little like done bin, like a little plastic bin or fabric bin of some kind. And so the same way we would check off on our schedule to move them from the front to the back, you would just pick up that object and place it into the done bin and say, okay, what's next? And then direct them through the schedule in just the same way we talked about before. And again, this is most useful if your child's having difficulty associating the pictures with the actual event. So if you've tried teaching several times, but they really don't seem to be making a link between this little icon and breakfast, maybe an actual spoon is going to help them a little bit more to start with. Okay, so I think we have several more things we're going to cover in the second half, but to give us all a little break and me a little break, we're going to take a 10-minute break here. Right, Patricia and Iris, does that sound okay? So we will come back at 7:03 then to keep going.
Thank you, Abby.
Okay. So hopefully everyone's back from a quick break there. So we have 4 more types of visuals that we're going to cover. So sorry, one of my cats has joined me in the background. I hope that is not bothersome to anyone. We have 4 more types of supports we're going to cover, and then we should have plenty of time for questions. So the next type of support I want to talk about is using visuals to set daily limits. So this is when an item is limited, either how many per day or how much per day or per week a kiddo can have of something. This is a visual representation of how many or how much of that is still available to them. So this is helpful when limits are unclear or when a child asks for additional items frequently beyond what is allowed. So an example here, this is pulled from the Autism Speaks Visual Supports Toolkit, but I like this one a lot, is if a kiddo is allowed to have 3 ice cream treats per day, maybe you would post this consistently on the fridge, and every time they had one, you would just cross it off, and that they would know how many they have left throughout the day. And again, this is where I think just having that consistent visual reminder goes so much further, even if you've told them many times 3 ice creams a day. I think if a kiddo is going to you and asking for ice cream repeatedly, they think there's a chance they're going to get it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking you, right? And every time that they're told no, if they thought there was a chance they're going to get it, it's like a fresh loss to them. It's like I rolled the dice and I lost, right? Whereas instead of going through that and having maybe a big emotional response to an unexpectedly being denied something that they wanted, having this consistent visual reminder there kind of takes all of that gamble and emotional turmoil out of it, and makes controlling our emotions about this, even if we can't have more ice cream, a lot more manageable. So another example here, candies at the store is one I've made before. So this is something you'd want to just put in a plastic page protector, and it was meant this kiddo was allowed 2 chocolate bars at the store. They crossed out off for each one that he chose. And then this had some additional rules involved with it, that he needed to be quiet on the way out of the store. And if he threw a tantrum about how many candies he was allowed to get, because he was used to getting 10 candies at the store, then we were going to get no candies. And so that was the additional rules there at the end. Again, whether or not that's something like that is going to be helpful for your child really depends on the kiddo, whether or not they would understand something like that. Another example here for something that's more of a quantity or a fluid quantity. So something like time. So device time throughout the day, my computer time left. So if a kiddo was allowed 1 hour of computer time each day, maybe you would fill in every 10 minutes that they had kind of completed, and you could track throughout the day. So whether they did this all at once or they did this in a couple 20 or 30-minute chunks, you would kind of track throughout the day, okay, here's how much you have left. So to create something like this is something there's not a template for, because it's so individual what you would actually need and what the situation is. So you'd want to determine the rules or limits for the item. Make sure the rule is clear and consistent. If you can't create a clear, consistent rule, it's not going to be clear to your kiddo what the rule is, and they're going to keep pushing you because they know sometimes it's not consistent. Sometimes I get 5 candies a day, right? And so consistency is going to kind of help be our friend here in helping kids get used to what the limits really are. Then determine how to visually represent the allowed amount they're able to have. So whether it's a number of items or time or percent completed, how do you really represent what's left? Again, keep the visual where it's easily seen. Remind kiddo of the rules as needed. So if they are asking, even though they've used them, you might just want to direct to here like, oh, there's no ice creams left today. And with all other visuals, some teaching might be needed initially. The next type of visual I want to discuss is called like an available, not available sign. So this is a visual representation of what items are or are not available at a given time. It's helpful for setting expectations for when certain items or activities are available. So again, if there's something a kiddo really prefers, but they can't have it consistently, I think screen time is a big one that I make this one for families. when a child frequently requests an item or activity that is unavailable or that you would like to place limits on. This kind of helps set some clear boundaries there. So a couple of different kinds here that I have, and these should all be in your templates. So when it's just one item that is consistently the thing of contention, then I like to make one like this, where it's just one big page like this. So you would want to print off the full page available, not available template in that case. And you would want to put it right on the back, or if you have two sheets, to put them together. And then cut out and paste an image of the single item on each side. And to use this, you would just want to think of it like an open close sign at the store, really, right? So you would just kind of turn it. And so I've made these for TV, for kiddo that want to go to the pool all the time. But when there's one thing that kiddos really want and it's not available at certain times. I've also seen something like this made as like a red light, green light, maybe that someone put on the TV. But again, just to set expectations where their kiddo's not going to you and asking you consistently, and then hoping and then being mad at you when you are the source of the answer no. Just to kind of let them know consistently, this is not a time this is available. This is a time this is available. So you want to hang it near the item, and for an activity, place it in a common area that has to do with that activity, something that makes sense. And then just flip the visual like an open or close sign at the store throughout the day to indicate the current status of the item or the activity. And again, all of these things take teaching. So kind of reference it. If a kiddo asks you, reference it and say not available. But through the process of, okay, every time it's green, I get it. And you point to it and tell them, yeah, available, here it is. Or no, not available. Kids will start to learn the significance of each side. Provided we're consistent. Again, consistency is going to be really key here. On the other hand, if there's a lot of, it's not consistently one thing that's a problem, there are lots of things or several different things, might be more helpful to create something like this where you can kind of interchange them. So for something like this, you see on this side, I have all my, on the not available, all my screen time ones again, iPad, computer, watch TV, but there might be times when those are available. And so we could just switch them over here. Maybe outside is probably something we can't always do, right? So there's probably times outside wants to go over here as well. So same kind of idea, and it's similar to a choice board in some ways, but just kind of shows what are options right now, what are not options right now. So for something like this, you need your blank template, and you probably would want the one that's split where you can see both of them at the same time. Otherwise, if you needed a bigger one, you could just have two next to each other. Print the icon images again with the items or activities, a printer and scissors, and ideally a laminator and Velcro. So you'd want to print off and laminate the board template, or again, this one's just in a plastic page protector. Pretty much everything on here was made without a laminator, so you can always hack them this way. Print and cut out your icon choices, laminate and cut out the icon, or laminate or do in your packaging tape the icon choices. Placing the soft Velcro on your board or template side. Again, this might be a situation where you want to avoid a straight line, so it doesn't look like a schedule that you're going to progress through every single one of those. And then place your hard Velcro onto the icon choices themselves. So same kind of hacks like we just talked about, plastic page protector. If you don't need it to be interchangeable, if there are consistent things that are available or not available, then you can just print it off with the choices already on it and have your child point. So how to actually use this, again, place this board in a logical, accessible location. So something like this, a lot of times I see go like in a playroom or near a lot of toys. If the child, again, have it near the toys, or if it's something like snacks, because you could easily do something like this with snacks and it could be quite useful, near the kitchen, always within view or reach of the kiddo. So it's not useful if they can't see it, right? So make sure it's in a logical place where they can easily reference it. Again, if they select appropriate options without referencing the choice board, good, let them do that. Don't pull out the choice board and make them do it, because that's the goal we're working towards. But really, if they keep requesting unavailable choices or are just kind of complaining that they're hungry or bored without making a choice, then you'd want to direct them to the board to make a better choice. And to teach something like this, again, if a child, just kind of like the full page one before, if a child tries to select a not available item, just point to this red side here and kind of say not available or iPad is not available, then redirect them over here. Or you can choose book, Lego, watch TV, or toys. If the child chooses an item from the right side, they'll praise them right away. So let's say they point to Lego, and then you can say, Lego, good choice, and then give them Legos right away. Help them get access to that thing right away. To again, show them the difference through repeated attempts that when I pick something over here, it doesn't work. When I pick something over here, it works. So that cause and effect type learning. Okay, the next type of visual I want to talk about is a wait card. This is a visual cue that something will be available after a period of waiting. This is helpful when a kiddo has difficulty waiting for requested items or activities, or if they have a hard time understanding the difference between no and wait. And so what is this? Oftentimes this is just a single visual. It's one of the simpler things we're going to look at. Just one single visual representation of wait, either a clock or yield sign, a hand, whatever you think would be most intuitive to your child on a card. Choose that icon again that you think your child's most likely to be to understand. And something like this is something that is used fairly often. So it's probably something you would want to protect either with packaging tape or with a laminator. So how to teach a wait card. If your child asks for an item they can have, but not immediately, you'll want to show them the wait card. You might have to practice with items that are actually available to begin with, and that's because you might want to start by having your kiddo practice waiting for very short amounts of time to start with. So you kind of think of it like building tolerance, right? Like if you were trying to build tolerance to run a marathon, maybe the first day you could run a mile and you would practice that every day for a week. And maybe the next week you could run 2 miles and you would slowly build up your ability. Your ability to wait is kind of something you would think about in the same way. So you might want to practice at first with something that you have right there, and you might want to start as short as like 5 to 10 seconds. So let's say they ask for a snack and you do have it available, but you want to practice teaching them to wait. You would show them the wait card and then say, okay, first wait, and then either count aloud or have a timer initially. So you would say, first you have to wait 5, 4, and then count down. After the time is up, if they have been calm that whole time, you want to praise them and then immediately kind of put down the wait card. Or if you handed it to them, take it back and give them the item and say, good waiting. As your child gets used to waiting, you can wait for longer and longer periods of time and for things that actually weren't available, which is probably the goal of this, right? There's probably some things where they might have to wait quite some time for it because you actually need to finish your phone call before you can make the mac and cheese or whatever it is. So you'll work up to that and then start to implement them in those situations where they actually do need to wait for things. So it might take a little bit of time. Another way to do this is you can actually hand the card to your child as a reminder, especially if your child is able to wait a little bit longer, then have them trade it back to you for the item when it's ready. Almost think of it like when they give you the buzzer at a restaurant for when your reservation's ready. And if you are doing something like that and your child is kind of more verbal and more able to wait a little bit longer, you could do something like what's on here, and that's actually what I have in front of me, or the rules are on the back. You can't see it very well, but it's on the screen. So in this situation, we had come up with a rule with this family that I need to hold on to this card and wait nicely until mom is back. and comes to get it. And if he hadn't asked, because this was a problem more with like consistent nagging and bothering mom when she was trying to get something done, if he hadn't asked again before she came to get the card, that we were giving some kind of extra reward. So if he was waiting for a treat, maybe he got an extra one, some small reward of some other kind, but something else that we kind of baked into this. So if he had successfully done that, he would get some other kind of reinforcement for doing so. So that's another idea. Again, if your child is a little bit more verbal and you think would understand that text and those concepts. Okay, the next thing on here is timers and transitions. So this is a visual representation of when an activity is going to end. This is most helpful when kiddos have difficulties with transitions, especially moving from a preferred to a non-preferred activity, but also with tolerating non-preferred activities and getting to the end of them. So first, visual timers. So something like this, that's an actual countdown. This usually works best when you know exactly when an activity is going to end or when you're able to control exactly when an activity is going to end. So something like what you see all the way on the right is like a big physical clock timer. That's something that you can buy. You might see those in classrooms. Sometimes they're readily available on Amazon. And again, you would just set the timer and it counts down. It's kind of intuitive to look at. Again, always about piloting things cheaply and easily before you make purchases. So there's plenty of phone apps or timers or things. This one looks just the same, this phone app. I know a family had told me before they had found one where like a caterpillar ate a bunch of apples kind of counting down. So there are pretty kid-friendly ones that are out there as well. So how would you use a timer like this? You're going to set the timer for the length of the activity. You would want to show it to the kiddo at the start. And if they understand the language, you might want to tell them like, okay, we're going to play Legos for 25 minutes or something like that. And then I would state something like when the timer says beep, 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 Legos will be all done, or whatever is the activity you guys are doing. Then provide frequent reminders. You're going to want to leave this where the kiddo can see it. But if a kiddo's doing something they really like, they're probably going to forget about it quickly and be wrapped up in doing their Legos or whatever they're doing. So we're going to want to every 10 minutes, provide those warnings. And at first, more often. Over time, you can provide them less often. So provide a reminder, okay, look, 5 more minutes, then Legos will be all done. When the time runs out, this will go off, and then you will say, oh, the timer said beep, 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 Legos are all done. And then you'll want to prompt your child to begin transitioning to the next activity. So follow through there. You can combine something like this with the first then or a visual schedule as well, so that you know, okay, here's the next thing we're doing. We can also do a visual countdown, and a visual countdown works better when you don't know the exact amount of minutes it's going to be before an activity ends or when that's not in your control. So within the starter kit, I think we have a template for something that looks like the stoplight you see on the left. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. But some other ones that we've used before, the one in the middle shows a line. I actually made that for a family was going to the airport. So there's quite some long lines there. And it's meant just to be folded to show, okay, we're at this long line, now we're at the shorter line. And you just kind of estimate like about 20% through this, I think, to show them where we're at. Some even kind of lower tech ways. Someone has made something similar with Lego bricks here, again, just to show, okay, we're about 20% done. Okay, there's about this much left, just visually, where are we at? And same thing with Post-its, you could just do. So for something like the stoplight, and again, these all would work kind of in the same way. You want to begin with the green light at the start of the activity and then bring the kiddo's attention to it and prompting them to begin. So you would point at the top and say, okay, you can start Legos if you're trying to give them how much time's left for a preferred activity. This also can be helpful for letting them know I'm almost done with something I don't like. So begin Legos in a certain case, or begin your bath time if that's something they don't like. When the activity is about 50% complete, you'll want to take off the green light and then point to the yellow and say, okay, about half done, or if you were using one of the other visuals that was more like 20%, just kind of let them know, okay, a little bit more to go. When the activity is completed, remove the yellow light, point to the red light, and let them know the activity is finished. And then you would want to prompt them to begin transitioning to the new activity. So it's a similar idea to the visual timer, just so kids are not caught off guard when activities end. It helps ease some of that upset about transitions, but just in a more like qualitative, like we have about this much left kind of way when you don't know the exact amount of minutes. Okay, so that's the last specific thing I wanted to talk through. I just have a couple general thoughts, and then we can open up to questions. So the first thought is about durability. So, try these things first, but if you find that they're working well, a lot of times laminators and page protectors are investments that are worth it. So you can use your same visuals again over time. Portability, I think, is another thing to think about. Am I just going to use this at home, or do I need to take it on the go? So sometimes folders work quite well. Sometimes I see, where did I put my other ones? Give me 1 second. Like maybe you would want to put a schedule or a first then on the front of your folder, one of your more popular templates that you use, and you can put another one on the back or just a done. And then on the inside of your folder, you can store all of your icons. And this can be like a nice, easy thing to move around with you and keep all of your pieces in one place. So that can work well. A lot of times, especially if you buy something from like PEX, which again is a branded, they use these small books that almost look like photo albums, something like that you can insert pages into, and keeps it all together. You can pick it up and move it around well. Increasingly, people are trying to make apps with some of these things. I don't know of any in particular that I recommend quite yet, but I haven't looked recently, and I feel like the apps change every day. So that's something that would be worth looking into. And I think in the near future, we might see some very good ones. The next thing I think to always think about is, again, a system that works all together. So the big thing here is make sure you put the same side of Velcro on the same materials, so that all of the icons either have the soft side, all of the boards or templates have the hard side, or vice versa. So you can switch them all out and that they all go together. Again, with individualizing something, I haven't talked about much yet is the specificity of the pictures. So in the starter kit and a lot of the examples I have, we have like these little cartoony guys. Some kiddos don't do as well with those. Some kiddos do better if you like take a picture of like, this is my actual toothbrush, or this is my actual teacher, more specific things. Again, those are harder to put in a template because everyone has different things. You really have to individualize those, but that's one thing to think about. And after some teaching, if you feel like your kiddo's still not making the connection, sometimes going to a more specific picture is going to help you. And that's the same idea with the object schedule, right? An object schedule is even like a step up from a specific picture, is like the specific item. So we're getting more and more specific and more concrete if a kiddo is having a hard time with the more abstract or kind of cartoony general pictures. And the last item here is taking time to teach. So again, sometimes kiddos do get these right away. Visual processing tends to be more of a strength for kiddos on the spectrum, especially. But oftentimes this still takes a little bit of teaching to show them the significance. So show them how these things work, show them why it's important, teach them when the timer goes off, that does mean the activity ends. Through a little bit of repetition, a lot of times we can get there. After that, I just have some additional resources, and the last couple pages here are references. So I'll just show you my references quickly. Additional resources that I would recommend. Autism Speaks has a really nice visual supports toolkit that explains a lot of these things. I pulled a couple examples from there today. The Indiana Resource Center for Autism also has some really nice things, including like specific how-to handouts that are very detailed for visual schedules, for choice boards, a bunch of these things we went through. And UNC Teach Tips also has some nice resources, including additional resources for classroom-based materials too. So those would all be additional resources I would recommend. And with that, I am happy to take questions.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions and engagement during our Q&A session. This concludes our training. Thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate you spending your evening with us. And a big thank you to Project AFECT and Dr. Harry and Shaw and our interpreters, Sabrina and Clara. Just as a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with the presentation and materials from this training. Okay, have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.